All right, guys, today we're going to talk about possibly my favorite prequel of all time. It's Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom next on Drew Reviews. All right, guys, so Temple of Doom has always been my personal favorite Indiana Jones film, even though I can admit that The Last Crusade is probably a better film and Raiders of the Lost Ark is most definitely a better film. This movie to me is one of the most fun of the three. It's also the darkest of the three, and I think that's why I like it so much. It's got a lot of horror elements, especially when they get down in the temple and everything and they're ripping hearts out. But this movie was actually in 1984 one of the reasons we got a PG-13 rating. Got movies like this coming out and Gremlins and Red Dawn all around the same time. And so that's where that PG-13 rating comes in. So the first time I ever saw Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, it was on this medium called video disc. I'll put a picture up right here. It's kind of this cartridge that held kind of like a vinyl record, but it had these real fine grooves in it. And my parents actually would rent these on a Friday night, and we would rent several movies. I can remember this being one of them, Terminator being another one. I can remember Stripes, I think, watching that as well. And we really enjoyed those times renting this player and these movies and everything. And I really miss video stores for that. But I can remember my parents had actually really thought about buying one of these things. And they're so glad they didn't because they were super expensive. This would have been like 84 or 85. They ended up buying like a huge C-band satellite, which I can thank them for later because I ended up watching all kinds of wrestling on that thing. But that was the first time I ever saw this movie. And then I can remember being a kid and watching Muppet Babies, and they had like the whole minecart sequence and everything that they parodied. But there was a large period of time, probably like 2 decades, where I hadn't seen Temple of Doom, and so I can remember renting this at the one video store we had left that my friend Brandon Smith eventually owned. But I remember renting it and putting it in, and you got that opening dance number with Anything Goes. And I remember thinking, am I watching the right movie? Is this Indiana Jones for real? I saw Lucasfilm, but it totally had me, just like it probably, pulled in audiences back in 1984. But I really like that opening dance number, with Kate Capshaw and all the dancers. And in the meantime, you've got Dr. Jones and Lao She and all of his henchmen, and they're fighting over this diamond. And as they're fighting, people are going crazy. There's gunshots going off. Ice gets spilt. They can't find the diamond. It's just a really great opening sequence. But I noticed something the other night when I was watching the video in preparation for this review. The scene where Harrison Ford and Kate Capshaw, fall out and they hit that canopy. There's a neon sign right there with like a martini glass, and I'm pretty sure I haven't done like a scene to scene comparison, but I'm pretty sure that martini glass neon was actually in Blade Runner, which starred Harrison Ford. So if so, that's pretty cool there. If you watch this movie, pause it as they're falling. It's right there, I think, to the left. And after that scene when they're trying to get away from Lao She and his goons, there's some funny stuff going on there. They come out of the Obi-Wan Kenobi club, and then once they get to the plane, there's Dan Aykroyd in a cameo that it's like if you blink, you'll miss it. But I love the big reveal at the end of that scene whenever Harrison Ford and Short Round and Kate Capshaw end up getting into that airplane, and Lao She's just watching them. And a nice try, Lao She, and shuts the door, and he actually owns the airplane. Then you get kind of into the main part of the story, when they come into that village there in the Himalayas, and the Shankara stone and the children are missing, and the village is drying up and everything. They had fallen from the sky, and I'll talk more about that later and just how ludicrous that was. But they fell from the sky, so it was a sign from the gods, that they were there to help them and everything. That was all right. Once they get to Pankot, though, to Pankot Palace, this movie to me is a lot of fun. They go and they're guests of the Maharaja, and they have this just terrible dinner, with the snake surprise and the chilled monkey brains and everything. And you know, where that could be seen as racist and just kind of barbaric and everything. It's silly and it's not meant to be taken seriously. But after that, to me, is where the real fun begins in this movie. Once you get into that second act, and they're in their bedrooms at night and they find that secret passageway to the temple and everything, and you've got walls that lower. And anytime I'm at a place where a gate lowers or like a car garage door lowers, I can't help but think of Indiana Jones. Um, they've got the scene where the ceiling lowers there with the spikes on it, and it gets his hat and is pulling his hat down. That's a great visual, and I like that scene. And I like how him and Short Round are arguing of whether he hit that button on the wall or not. And I love the interaction, the dynamic between Dr. Jones and Short Round. He's kind of like his surrogate son. They have that scene where they're playing poker while the animals are terrorizing Willie. And I just love those scenes with them together. In watching this the other day for the first time in probably 10 years, um, I really like when they get down into the temple and they're watching that ceremony, where they're drinking the blood and lowering the guy down into the lava. That set is so impressive. You know, Today you would just CGI that and it would come across as kind of cheap looking to me. The time and the craftsmanship spent on that set, if you haven't seen it in a while, pull it up and watch it. It's amazing. And my hat's off to everybody who had anything to do with that. And it's at that point, wherever they had the heart ripping scene where he pulls the heart out of the guy and it's still beating and catches on fire. And that's one of the reasons for the creation of the PG-13 rating. That's just an intense scene. And I really like that. I like that Molaram character. He's really cool, just like a really cool looking and really menacing villain. Of course, you have the minecart chase, and there's a really cool stunt there where one cart's going on a lower track and one's on an upper track, and a guy jumps. Of course, it doesn't show him land, but just the whole visual of that is really cool. And before too long, you come up to my favorite scene in the entire movie, which is the suspension bridge scene. That scene is just awesome. I love kind of the tribal drums going off in the background. Dr. Jones is surrounded on both sides. He has nowhere to go. Olaram's telling him to give it up. It's just perfect suspense. What's he going to do? And he starts speaking, what is it, Cantonese probably, to Short Round. And he's, hold on, lady, we're going for a ride. And, he starts cutting that suspension bridge. And it's funny. What I love about that scene is you have these just fierce, heart ripping, blood drinking, people, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, you're crazy!" That scene made me laugh so hard. But I like most of the performances here. Harrison Ford in this movie got into some serious fighting shape. When you look at him, he has that scene in the temple where he's drinking the blood and he's been brainwashed, and yeah, he's got in some serious physical condition for this thing. And you see like where he has that sleeve ripped off on the suspension bridge, and you see the biceps and everything. And it's like you don't think of Harrison Ford that way, but he was in some great shape. Um, I like the character of Short Round. He's got some great lines in this movie where, Indiana Jones backhands him when he's under the spell and everything. He's like, "Indy, I love you," and that scene really got me right here. He's got some other really great lines in the movie, like whenever they're trying to get away in the beginning from Lao She, and Indiana Jones needs the antidote, and he knows it's in Willie Scott's dress, and so he goes diving in her dress for it, and she's like, "I'm not that kind of girl," and he's like, "No time for love, Dr. Jones." And I, I love that scene, and I laugh every time. Now, on the dislike side, I know a lot of people dislike this movie because of Kate Capshaw's performance of Willie Scott. And I get that. She's not Marion Ravenwood. She's not supposed to be, which is why she doesn't bother me quite as much. Like I said, I just watched this the other night, and she does scream a lot. Screaming really didn't take me out of the movie, though. So, I can kind of understand people not liking that character, but I thought for the character that was written, she played it fairly well. Um, the, the other thing about this movie, it's borderline racist. If I was an Indian man, there's some scenes in this movie that I might take offense to. With some of the things in the temple and some at that dinner, some of the things they're eating and the way that they're portrayed. But if I'd been Indian instead of Caucasian, I can see where somebody would have an issue with that. And then the other scene that people in this movie have issue with is when the plane's out of gas and they have no parachutes. Um, they take that raft and they jump out holding on to each other, and they fall a few hundred feet onto this raft and land in the snow and go down this hill and then go off that hill, until they hit water. And people are like, "Oh my gosh," To me, it is ludicrous and it's kind of stupid, but it's to me it's no more dumb than like the nuke the fridge scene, you know, in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And this is the one scene that kind of whatever, but I still enjoy it for what it is, and it doesn't take me out of the movie that bad. So I've always loved this movie from the first time I seen it. And exactly 10 years ago, the Palace in Springfield, Missouri, which of course is no longer there, on 3 consecutive weekends, they showed Raiders, they showed Temple, and they showed Crusade. And I told my wife and kids, hey, we're going to go see Temple. And my daughter, who at the time was 5 years old, she was raised on this movie, PG-13, but, at 5, she had seen it countless times. And so it was funny. Um, we're sitting there kind of toward the back of this big 250 seat theater, and my daughter, who's 5, is actually quoting the movie back to the screen, line for line. And there's this old couple in front of us, and I thought they were going to get mad, but they actually thought it was funny. So that's something me and my daughter always have. And speaking of that night, they actually had a movie trivia night that night, and the winner got to actually pick like a Midnight Madness movie to show up on the big screen. And I thought, well, what the heck, I got up there. It was like me and probably 25 other people. And we did like 4 different rounds. I remember there was like a Big Lebowski question that they hit first off. And so, I'm like, oh, I'm golden on this thing. And so I can't remember any of the rest of them other than it got down from those 25, it got down to me and like this 20-year-old girl. And the question they asked was about weird science, which I hadn't seen since I was about 8 years old. And at this point, I'm in my mid 30s, and I actually missed. So I didn't get to pick the movie. I think I was going to pick Predator or something, to watch. The person who did end up winning picked They Live, which I got to see there, and that was awesome on the big screen. But those are the main memories I have of that night. If I'm going to give Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom a rating, it's a straight 8.5. I love this movie. I think Raiders is probably like a 9.5, and it can have that rating. I do like this movie more. I respect this movie more, but Temple of Doom for me is where it's at. In all of its halfway racist, screamy, PG-13, heart ripping, blood drinking glory. I like this movie a lot, and I can't believe from the time we saw it in 2013 at the movies, I can't believe it'd been like 10 years since I'd watched it again, because I'd actually sit down to do this review and I'm like, oh man, I'm gonna have to see this again. So yeah, if it's been a while since you've seen Temple of Doom, check it out. So guys, as always, I'd like to thank you for watching. Be sure and like and subscribe, hit the bell and everything. I think next time out, I've got My Bloody Valentine coming. So be looking for that. And as always, I'm Andrew, and I'll see you down the line.